programme of speakers that we had yesterday. We heard 2 yesterday, and we're now going to hear from Donald Boyd from the Huntly Development Trust. And this is today's community story. Please welcome Donald.
Thanks, Agnes. I am seriously contemplating about being one of the first to disappear out that door. So, yeah. Thanks, and apologies immediately to the people who were in the renewables session beforehand. You're going to see many of the same slides, hear many of the same things, so feel free to nod off. We heard yesterday from Coich and from What If, now Huntly, so we're in different parts of Scotland. It's great to see and feel that we're part of a movement that's changing things for our communities. That's where Huntly is. We're under that big red star in the communist Soviet state of Huntly, and we serve not only that market town of Huntly, but we serve also as the Development Trust. We serve the rugby ball-shaped catchment that we have there. Huntly's probably like many market towns in Scotland. It's struggling, or has been struggling. I think it's just trying to cope with that change from its traditional role as a rural service centre to having 2 edge-of-town supermarkets, internet shopping, changing people's lifestyles, etc., etc. It's almost just repurposing the town for the 21st century is, I think, where we're at. And we as the Trust are playing a role in that. We want to be around for the long term to do that. As the Development Trust, we don't want to be sort of a grant-funded initiative that disappears after 2 or 3 years. So we're faced with this twin dilemma, this twin challenge that we all face of doing the good things that we want to do and our community needs done, while having the money, the resource there to enable us to do that. So those who were at the renewables presentation beforehand will have heard how we're trying to generate that muscle, if you like, to allow us to be here for the long term and to be a serious player in investment in our own community. We came off the previous initiative, but we won't get into that now because we don't have time for that. And it was at the backdrop of the financial crisis, just when we were finding out that austerity was coming our way, and we were going to have to do more for ourselves as a community. That previous initiative that's mentioned there was great, publicly funded, but the plug was pulled just as the austerity hit. So it was clear that we had to take our future really into our own hands if we wanted to be serious about regenerating our lovely market town. The Trust itself, well, many development trusts, we're member-owned, 500 plus members, we've got 30 or so active volunteers, including a board of directors. We've got 4 members of staff at the moment, and our turnover last year was about £1 million, and a lot of that is related to projects that we're doing. This is our journey so far. Those of us who were here before the break will have seen that, and the crucial turning point in that bumpy journey was getting hold of a piece of land. That was the absolute turning point for us. It's only 63 acres, nothing compared to what's here. It's a bleak, windy piece of Aberdeenshire hillside, but it's been the key turning point for us as a trust, and through us, hopefully, for our community's future. In lots of different ways, but it's a farm called Greenmires up on the hill, and it's enabled it so much to happen. That, just tell you briefly about that close to the edge bit. We had been we decided back about 2010 that renewables was our future. We were going to get into that. We were discussing things with various people. One landowner said, yes, I'll do it for nobody else, just for the community. And he was already a landowner who had 7 turbines on his farm, so we thought, right, an 8th next door to those turbines on the same land holding. What could be easier? Well, that wasn't quite what happened. We were going to do it in partnership with the housing association. It was taking too long for them, so they changed their minds and pulled out of the partnership. The landowner also changed his mind, decided at the end of the day that he wasn't going to do it, and it was all a bit hairy at that point, and that's my personal perception of our chance of survival as a trust. Lo and behold, what happened? In the same week, the farm next door to that farmer's land came up for sale on the open market, and the Land Fund put out an announcement saying that it was open again and it had money to help communities secure land assets for the future. And if you see the guy holding the Y in the middle there, many of you might recognise Monroe Gold, who worked for the Land Fund, and he was absolutely fantastic in helping us get things done. So we wouldn't be here without the Land Fund, and I'm really, really, really grateful for that. So 6 years in the planning, 6 days in construction. That's our wind turbine, and I never tire of seeing that and never stop being sick when I see that. That's a gentleman standing on the top of the turbine underneath the blades there. And you can see that the sun also shines in Huntly on occasion. So what do? We take the income from that turbine, plus 2 or 3 other developments that we're involved in, and we use it to keep the staff team going, pay the expense of running an organisation. We use it to lever in investment from elsewhere, and we use it to deliver projects that our community says they want to see happen. And you can see the range of them there. I'll pick up on a couple of them in a minute in slightly more detail, but that's how we're operating. We've been going since 2009, we're in 14 years in. In many ways it still feels we're finding our feet, but maybe that's just always the case, because the world moves on so fast around about you that you just always have to keep changing. Key thing for our community right from day one was this idea of a market town that was changing. Lots of buildings in the town centre became vacant. It had a really sad air about it in 2018, and that's somebody who's born and brought up there, who chose to come back to live there after living abroad. It was my community. It felt sad, and I think people had lost faith that there was a future. I think that's all part of the work that we're doing collectively, is to put faith back into our communities that things are good. These are great places to live. We just have to make that possible. So the top priority in community consultations has always been to do something around about the state of the town centre. So again, with the help of the Land Fund, we bought a former RBS building, have turned it into a community bookshop. It's a really strongly run community volunteer bookshop, and we let that out for almost nothing to the bookshop, and they have regenerated the square. Their volunteer base has been absolutely great. Much different scale. We then bought a former department store. There is such a thing in Huntly. Former department store on the town square. This flagship, beautiful building, and we've been regenerating it, redeveloping it for about 18 months now, and the scaffolding came off last week, so we could get this picture of it in its fresh state. And that will provide, we think, about 20 jobs. We think it's going to host a cafe, a multi-event space with cinema, probably not dissimilar to this in scale. There'll be co-working, which got a real boost during the COVID time. Lots of sort of people working in farmhouses, small hamlets out and about with rubbish broadband. This will be a place where they can come and co-locate. And there'll be various other things there. One of the things we're really excited about is that working with the local school, we've created a learning zone, so that school pupils, many of whom find it slightly less attractive to study and attend school, can be taken here, and they'll get the chance of studying in a different environment. We'll bring colleges here, we'll bring different forms of learning here. Other major priority coming out from all the consultations is about transport. We can't do much about the stagecoach links and the ScotRail links and that sort of thing, but what we can do is make it easier to get around the local area. So we've been doing lots of different things in that. We've taken on the community minibus, we're running a shared car co-wheel scheme, we're building paths, we're encouraging people to walk and cycle, we hire out electric bikes, we're working with the school again, looking at ways to get kids to and from school safely so they don't have to get driven to school, they can just walk and cycle or that type of thing. And we're about to open actually a physical base for the travel hub, which will be quite a challenge for us to make it run and work, but we're up for it to try and promote that whole thing much better. That's where we are. There's our balance sheet with the assets that we have down the left-hand side and our liabilities as they are down the right-hand side. see that there was this crazy spell last October, November, when we got all this publicity. We got, we had out of doors came to speak to us. Martin Geisler was going, it was maybe two years ago, Martin Geisler was up doing his Who Owns Scotland thing, and then we were in Scotland's Climate Journey film. It was we must be doing something right. Although my mum just said you should have got your hair cut before you went on the telly. And mothers are always right. So what next? We've got this bleak piece of Aberdeenshire hillside, 63 acres. We realise that it's not just a place to host a turbine, but it can do all this other good stuff for our community. So we're gradually, over time, we're turning it into a venue that's less bleak, and it can serve lots of other purposes. We've converted the farmhouse into what we call the eco-bothy, so it's a super insulated community space. People can go and hire either to meet and have fun, or they can then use it as the base for exploring the wider site. The wider site we've planted with 6,000 native trees. We've created wildlife ponds, created some paths, even a path that links back to Huntly, the 3 or 4 miles that gets there. And during COVID, we found that people were really obviously wanted to get outside and enjoy themselves. And on the farm, there's also a big pond. So we're looking at creating a sort of water sportsy adventure tourism base for very, very beginners, and let's get people encouraged to get outside. So this is an example of what it might look like in about a year's time. We'll be working with the council, looking at the idea of tackling holistically some of the issues around about the school and the wider sports area around the town. So it's beautiful. It really is. Almost everyone who walks down there from the square thinks it's been tailor-made over the years, but it's actually just evolved accidentally. And it creates opportunities, but it's also got some challenges there. There's no money from the council to help do what the community wants to see happen. So we're trying to say, well, if we can do some of this, would you then come over the bridge in 2 or 3 years' time, or 4 years' time, get it into your capital plan, whatever it is. So we're looking at doing that again with all the community backing that we've had from the sports groups and this childcare sector and that type of thing. And the ones who were here before the break will have heard about our plans to hopefully do some more renewable energy stuff, looking at creating green hydrogen through electrolysis, taking wind and solar, and doing that sort of thing. Again, income that would be generated from that would go into those types of projects, and, for example, start insulation schemes for the whole of the AB54, that whole community benefit that we serve, so that we're not just taking the money for the energy and putting it into something else, but actually taking the money and helping people insulate their homes. That's the type of thing we're looking at next. Whether it'll happen, who knows, but as we all know, if you don't start somewhere, you won't get anywhere. So that's what we've learned, Agnes. Always listen to your mothers. Not on there, but that's the top there. And yeah, I think the key message from that is number 9. There is a lot of support out there. We couldn't have done this without the support we've had, whether it's knowledge exchange, whether it's funding, whether it's just a bit of encouragement. It's tremendous what's out there, and CLS is going to provide that to lots of members. It does provide that. I can't not plug Community Energy Scotland as well. I'm a board member of that, and so is Carla in the past. Yeah, those organisations, they're there to help, and they will. And at the end of the day, yeah, this is what it's all about, really, isn't it? It's about creating opportunities. It's about using land and assets to give our next generation sort of hope. I really like the word that Marie Goujon used yesterday about being a landholder. I think that for me, that's got a different connotation to being a landowner. I mean, it's close. We always talk about ourselves as being custodians, and I think it is that thing about passing it on to the next generation. So that's my son before he turned into a teenager. And, so that's me. Thank you.
Indeed, Donald. Trying to think what your mother looks like. I'm just wondering. We've got a few minutes for any questions or any comments, maybe for Donald, because I am going to then. You want to use that? Oh, right. Okay.
We could ask you in the last session.
Okay. But we'll stop fairly tight at 12 to move on to the next section. So, any questions or comments from the floor? Yeah, over here, Bobby.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Dawn, fantastic, really amazing stuff, and a huge amount of activity, and really an example, I think, for us in this room of a really very successful organisation. And my question is, based on that, you listed as one of the liabilities local perception. Do you want to just say a little bit about that, and kind of, if there is a negative perception locally, why that arises and how it can be challenged, I suppose?
Yeah, thanks Bobby. It's a really important question for me, and I think where it's coming from is a couple of places. One is that it took us a long time to get going, if you like. These projects are big, and you know we could see the long game of having to generate income to regenerate the town centre, but we couldn't find the short way of doing it. We did try. We tried to get hold of a couple of town centre buildings, and it just couldn't work. We didn't manage to make it work. So then we took a step back and thought, right, renewable energy is the route. So to get the renewable energy, you need the land, and you need the loans, and you need the feasibility, and you need the planning consent, and you need the finance, and you need the grid, and so there was a bit of, what the hell are they up to buying that farm on the hill? You know, what's it about? And although we were communicating, this, it was just, and so finally, the unveiling 2 weeks ago of the scaffolding of that big building, I think there was almost an aha moment, but it's taken, what's that, 13, 14 years to get there. And you know, we have communicated and people do understand, but I think there is that sort of, if it's not tangible and it's not visible, what are they doing? And so there are lots of lessons for us there as a trust about the next stages of what we need to do as well.
I think a lot of us will understand these comments, Donald. It's quite interesting how the community perceives something that you mentioned is very visible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you spend hours working on it.
Yeah.
One final question, maybe. Yeah, Maria.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about, yeah, we did this work, that doesn't work, and we changed this and we changed that. My question is, because in my view, it is easier said than done, so I really want to know how you learn from your mistakes, how you bring the people together and learn together and grow themselves. What is the mechanisms of giving and receiving feedback? Thank you.
Yeah, we're not good enough at that, I would say, is probably the first thing. We're probably too busy doing instead of reflecting and listening all the time. But we do have a couple of forums in which we do things, and it's, you know, it has evolved through the years. So we have the membership of the trust, people who buy in, and we engage with them either by email or by meetings or whatever. And you know, I think one of the key things is we actually live there. You know, we meet them in the street, we meet them in the shop, we meet them. You know, it's impossible. You know, if I go to town to get a pint of milk, my son says I'll see you in about 10 years' time, because it's just not possible. So there's that. There are slightly more formal mechanisms as well. We meet with lots of different groups in the council. There's a town forum thing, so we explain, we share knowledge and developments there. We have our social media feeds, and we've got all that sort of thing. But I think as an organisation, we probably need to take more time to reflect. Look at that. So at the moment, what we're doing is we're looking at our strategy for the next 5 years. But I was really interested in the Galston one, which is like it's a 20-year plan, which is reviewed over those 5-year periods. So that's a piece of learning for me today, is that actually we need to be doing that for a longer period. I don't know if that helps, Maria.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sure there are other questions. Thank you very much, Donald. That's brilliant. Okay, now for the really exciting part of the programme. And I'm going to hand over to Lindsay and Josh for priority setting. Haven't we all been round the table? Thank God there are no post-its. But
We're going to give you a brief overview of what we're working on at the moment and what we're looking at in the future. I'm going to talk about our work around support and promotion, and Josh has now been with us for how many weeks, Josh?
5.
Now an expert in community land ownership. So what you want to tell us about our policy work. So we're going to be using Mentimeter in this session. We're going to start by giving you a chance to fill in the question about the 3 big ideas if you've not done it already. So you can go on to Mentimeter now and fill in 3 big ideas if you've not done so already, and in real time. While Meg is sorting out the internet, I will just give you an overview of what we're working on at the moment, so you can start to think about whether it's how you want us to work. So Community Land Scotland still operates to the 4 founding principles that it was given by its 17 founding members, and they were to be a voice for the sector, and Josh is going to talk about that, to provide support to communities and help with peer-to-peer networking, to raise awareness and to build networks. And at Community Land Scotland, we've kind of developed a model where we work with communities and we find out where you're getting stuck, and then we try and take that evidence and use it to change the system. So the team works very closely across the support part of the team and the policy part of the team to make sure that cycle is happening. So in terms of our support work, a lot of our work is around helping early stage groups, often picking up the phone to people saying, I have no idea how to do this, I've got no background in this, and our job is really to say, no one has a background in this until they've actually done it. So we're there to help and help you find all the support that you need. Our members have a huge range of different assets, so part of our job is connecting people as well. So we've got, you'll have heard housing, renewables, harbours, nature. Our members work across a huge number of different areas, so part of our job is about helping with that flow of information. And we run a series of webinars called Meet the Pioneers, which you might have seen, where we usually get 3 organisations to talk about their own experience in a particular area so that other communities can hear from communities' real experiences. And we also have a post-acquisition training programme for communities that have already bought their assets. So in the past we've done things like finance, media, HR and so on. Our awareness raising work focuses on a number of areas, raising awareness to early stage groups that they might want to think about community ownership. A large part of that is taking your stories to inspire other people. We also try and share your work through the media, through social media and so on, and through the press. We have Community Land Week, which is much more focused on helping you share what you're doing with your communities. And we put out case studies, so you might have seen in the last few weeks that we've put out case studies around community wealth building, sharing what communities are doing to support the local economy, and also biodiversity. And we have quite a strong social media presence, and one thing we're very excited about is we're about to appoint a new PR and comms person in Community Land Scotland, which should allow us to really significantly up the amount of media work that we do in the organisation. And I suppose the third strand of what we do in Community Land Scotland has really developed through our hub work, which Kerry and Heather run. We were working with urban communities and we were seeing people come across the same problems again and again, and I think our feeling was we can't let the communities kind of bang their head against a brick wall trying to sort these problems individually. We need to help them take a more strategic approach. Through the hub, Heather works with groups to support them through their community ownership journey, and then Kerry takes the evidence from that to try and kind of tackle some of the systemic problems. When we set the hub up, I think a lot of people asked us if there was going to be a need to provide a service like this. We'd estimated we'd get 10 groups a year coming through the hub for support, and in 2 years they've had 87, so I think that showed there was a need. And we're looking to roll that hub model out, so we want to keep providing support to groups in Glasgow, some of whom are still at fairly early stages of their journey, but we'd like to take that hub approach to the next stage, and so we're thinking about what we'd like the hub to tackle next, and our thoughts are it could be around towns, it could be around some existing cold spots, it could be around climate and nature, so we'll be thinking about that over the next couple of months. And I think Meg has got Mentimeter working. So we'll go back to the 3 bold ideas. Do you support a limit on the total amount of land an amount of land individuals and businesses can own. I think that is pretty clear. 35 and 18. Maybe not everyone is sure what the exact limit should be. And if you've not done this yet, you can still do it after you leave. We'll still be looking at the responses. We'll reflect next year back on what the numbers were. And, well, 68 answers to how we can change things in areas of enduring poverty. Enter. She showed me this morning, but I hadn't my coffee. So yeah, lots of ideas there about what we can do to help support communities. So we'll have a really good look through that when we get back into the office. And then the third bold idea, should Scotland's land to be used to primarily build community wealth? Who is the naysayer? They just put that in and run away. So I think that's pretty clear that people think it should be used to build community wealth. So I've got a few support and promotion questions I want you to answer for me as well, to help in the work that I do and our team does when we're going out and sharing your stories. So, oh, do I need to go back? No. If you've not answered this already, can you tell me, through Mentimeter, one word to describe community land ownership? I think empowering and transformational are winning at the moment. Yep. And exciting. We always love exciting. Gallus, I can see in there as well. Yeah. It's going to have a t-shirt next year. Will be empowering, transformational, exciting. Thinking of those at all times. Our next one is, what community land achievement are you proud to tell us? Everyone's gone for something different. But we will study those at our leisure when we get back. Still more popping up. And then my final question before I hand over to Josh is to try and get some feedback from you on the 100 years of community ownership and which parts of that you would like to take part in. So having your community ownership story gathered is looking strong at the moment, and taking part in oral history, which is good because we developed the whole project, and then we were thinking last week maybe people won't like it and they won't want to tell us their story, so that's really positive for us. So on that note, I will say thank you, and I'll hand over to Josh to talk about policy.
Thanks, Lindsay, and yeah, thanks everyone. As Lindsay said, I'm the new policy manager, so I've been in post for about 5 weeks. So this is obviously my first CLS conference, and it's been pretty incredible. In a previous incarnation, I was an academic and went to a lot of conferences, and this blows it out of the park in terms of how open and thoughtful people are. Exactly, Bobby, what do you reckon? So yeah, I'm here to talk about our policy priorities over the next year, and I just want to say, if I haven't met you yet already, please do come and speak to me. I'm very keen that members are directly feeding into policy and informing what we're saying to policymakers and decision makers. So we've got 3 key priorities for 2023. This is connected to key bits of legislation that are coming through Parliament in the next couple of years, and also a response to rising issues like natural capital. So I just want to outline these to kind of focus our attention on the challenges and opportunities as we see them. So the first priority is, as we've been talking about at the conference, the Land Reform Bill and the opportunities it represents for community ownership. So we think there's a lot of opportunities here, but we need to make sure it delivers the conditions we need for further community ownership and to break up monopoly land holdings. There's also some opportunities here to tweak the implementation of existing legislation, to improve conditions for prospective community owners, and to make it fundamentally easier for communities to buy land. So what we're calling for is really a robust and ambitious land reform bill, which delivers on there's a couple of key aspects of it that we want to see. So a public interest test on 500 hectares or above, a public interest test which works in urban areas and applies to urban land and assets, the prior notification of sale for communities, a total cap on land ownership, which is why we were asking about that in the Mentimeter. We want to raise the notional threshold on the Scottish Land Fund as well to above 1 million. There's also a question on that in the Mentimeter. And as I mentioned, we want amendments to the community right to buy legislation, making it easier for communities to register their interest in land and therefore be able to trigger a community right to buy. And the second policy priority, which is very much in our eyes connected to this, is the community wealth building and how community wealth building can tie into the land reform agenda and further community ownership. So we see this as potentially transformational legislation which can support land reform, and it can help create vibrant local economies which retain wealth in local areas and can displace the predominantly extractive economic system which we currently have. So we see community wealth building as being able to create more housing, services and jobs, retain and grow local populations. It'll help address the inequality within our current economic systems and devolve economic power. It can build capacity, confidence and resources within local communities to take on further assets and land. And what we will do is it will build the wellbeing economies that many of our members have been demonstrating and pioneering over the past few years. So one job for us, as Lindsay was just saying, is to demonstrate to decision makers in government that our members are already doing this. There are already models that work around the country. But furthermore, we need legislative support so that this can be expanded out, so we can expand the existing good practice, we can enhance existing community wealth building and empower new community projects based upon that wealth building. The third policy priority for us, which you'll see reflected in the final question on the Mentimeter, is that we want to see a just response to the climate and biodiversity crises. And this is principally, in our view, a community-led action on the crisis. So we want to build our profile in relation to these issues, the climate and biodiversity crisis, and demonstrate the good work that all of you are undertaking, as Donald was mentioning earlier when he was discussing peatland restoration. So we want to work with a broad range of allies to demonstrate that community land ownership and empowered communities can and should be at the heart of our response to the nature crises. We want to ensure that large-scale interventions based upon natural capital ventures do not work against the policy objectives of diversifying land ownership and furthering community land ownership. And this kind of policy divergence that we've been seeing in recent months is something that we really want to try and address to make sure that the Scottish Government is aware of points at which the policy is diverging and actually make a strong case for how, when the policies come together through something like community land ownership, a lot more can be achieved. A key part of this policy priority is making a robust counter-argument that the nature crisis requires interventions at scale on large-scale land holdings. We fundamentally disagree with this. It undermines land reform, it undermines community wealth building, and the just transition to net zero. Instead, what we need to do is work at landscape scale, but collaboratively and across multiple land holdings, as colleagues on the European mainland do, as Donald was talking about with the peatland restoration, and as Noida are doing on 3,000 hectares of collaborative restoration on the peninsula we can see out of the window. And what we need to do is to hold government to account on its pledge for a just transition, to make sure it thinks beyond just transition in terms of the energy sector, and to make sure that this rush towards carbon markets, renewables and rewilding does not undermine other key policy objectives of land reform, community wealth building, and economic, social and cultural rights, which is part of the forthcoming human rights legislation which we'll see in the next couple of years. So just to finish off, there's a couple of key points I want to make, and really fundamental to this, in our view, is the interconnectedness of all of these different policy objectives. So all of them are underpinned by resilient, circular, sustainable, local wellbeing economies and cultures, which help create more houses and jobs, retain and grow local populations, whilst also helping Scotland's ecosystems recover. And just to bring in what Maria was saying, if we have these kind of resilient circular local economies, we begin to break the cycle of excessive consumption in the global north, which is driving the kind of colonisation that Maria was talking about in West Papua. Land reform encourages community wealth, and simultaneously, more community wealth creates the conditions of empowerment which make community land ownership more likely, and that in turn creates more wealth and less extractive land use, which feeds into more land reform. So we see this as a very circular process. Diversified land reform also addresses the climate and biodiversity crises, as local people want to protect, enhance and expand the green and blue spaces around them, and ensure they live in an environment in which their families and communities can thrive. Concentrated land ownership has resulted in Scotland having some of the most degraded land in Europe. whereas our members are leading the way in renewable energy and ecological restoration, as the two Donalds both showed earlier. And in closing, the long-term solutions to the nature crisis, the cost of living, growing inequality, political, economic and cultural alienation are for us to think locally by empowering communities around Scotland in order to ensure that we address the global challenges that we all face. So I'll finish there and move on. To talk about the Mentimeter. So we asked one word to describe community-led ecological restoration. And what have we got here? We've got vital, essential, encouraging, Indigenous-led. That stood out to me. Win-ein? Is that a typo? Or is that a word I don't understand? Win-win. We were going to talk about rewilding, but we thought this might prompt a slightly more positive way to finish the conference. We also wanted to talk about carbon offsetting, because obviously this is something that we're all kind of tackling at the moment, and we have real concerns about how carbon offsetting may look in 5, 10, 15 years' time as the growing evidence about its potentially dubious nature comes out. So greenwashing, problematic, worrying. Confusing. Confusing is a key one, and we have released some guidance to our members on how to potentially navigate the carbon markets if they're thinking about getting involved. And this is something that we are working on. If you are thinking about this as members, do come and speak to us, because we're working through this at the moment as well. This question that I mentioned about the land fund application. Sandra, sorry, I did tell you about this. So we're obviously a fan of the no threshold case-by-case basis, because we don't want to discourage anyone from putting in an application. And even if it's only a notional threshold, it's not helpful if it puts off potential landowners from thinking or kind of like tempers down their ambition. And then this is for us to think about in terms of what our priorities should be when we're developing policy and when we're lobbying and advocating government. And so it's, yeah, making it easier for communities to buy land, which is what most of the team work on. And the climate and biodiversity crisis, that's interesting to see. As Lindsay says, this is going to stay open for a while. If you haven't responded yet, please do. We will be looking over it next week. Cool. Time for some questions?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That's a hard way to learn for Josh that he's at a CLS conference with a ferry about to leave. But what I will encourage you to do is, if you have any thoughts following what you've heard from both Lindsay and Josh, please don't hesitate to email or message or get in touch directly, and indeed put in your comments if you haven't already done so. So, before I say a couple of last words, I have promised my friend Megan here, and nobody knows this but Megan, to say 5 words. Was it 5 words, or was it 10?
It's
something
10.
like maybe 10. Having embarrassed your mother this morning, I feel I owe it to you to give me a moment.
Thank you so much. So I just wanted to jump on a microphone before we finish and let you know about some changes and some opportunities for you within the Land Commission, particularly those who are real policy wonks around the lines that Josh has just described, because the Land Commission is a public body. There are 6 appointed commissioners. 3 commissioners have their terms finishing at the end of December, and over the summer the government will be advertising for new commissioners, people who want to be the new commissioners, to apply. It's frankly one of the best jobs I've ever had. If they don't change the terms, it's 2 days a month. I'm based in Applecross, Sally is in Lewis, in Golson. Lauren is in Oban. You can do it from anywhere in Scotland. You don't need to have previous board experience. I've never done anything before this. Previously, what they really need are people who are passionate about land reform, who are interested in land reform, and who have the knowledge and experience to to demonstrate to the whole country why land reform is important in terms of meeting much broader objectives and all these different crises. So I can't think of a better group of people in the room who understand this than you. So please think about applying, look out for the opportunities and the advertisements as they come out. And if you don't feel you want to do it yourself, then please encourage others to apply. So thank you. That's it. More than 10 words, but I think it's a really important message to get out.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. So yeah, as you know, we heard there, think about yourselves, and it's really important. If you're not interested, if it's not for you, ask somebody who you think can do it, and because that's the only way we'll get people in these roles that represent what we want to do. So very, very quickly, it's really my pleasure to say a few words to close this conference. It's been a fantastic couple of days, I think. It's been great to see people getting together, for me to meet some people that I haven't met in quite a few years, but to meet up again, and I see a lot of that going on around the room. And of course, as usual, and as we've heard several of the speakers say, things that they have picked up which they want to take back with them to their own place. And of course, we learn from each other that way, and that, as Lindsay reminded us, was one of the founding principles of CLS being set up in the first place, and it hasn't gone away. In fact, the case, if anything, is growing. There's big challenges ahead, there's no question. There's big challenges to make sure that, you know, communities everywhere can continue to shape the agenda, because the agenda is shifting. And in communities that some of us live in, which people wouldn't have maybe given tuppence for land not all that long ago, suddenly seems to be worth more than a few pennies. CLS is your organisation to work in. We're members, it's run by its members, it's shaped by its members, so it's really important that the members play their part, and that when there's opportunities to come together, when there's opportunities to feed in, that we all do that. We've heard some very personal stories over the last 3 days. Donald this morning. I think these 3 stories just gave us some beautiful vignettes of what's happening in communities, how it's not an easy path to go down, but by gum, if you stick with it and if you're able to hold the team together, it's worth it at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, why do we do it? Why do we put ourselves through that? Why do people give this so much energy? It's to make these communities that we live in better places for us to live in, for those that we love to live in, and for future generations to live in. That, at the end of the day, is what it's all about. This conference would not have happened, let me tell you, if it had been up to the CLS board. It certainly might have happened, but it wouldn't have run as smoothly or as well as it does. So, can I say on behalf of my board colleagues, and I'm sure on behalf of you, thank you to Lindsay and Meg and all of the team for organising these last couple of days, which have been absolutely excellent. Thank you. Thank you to Sabhal Mòr Ostaig. I mean, I'm not quite sure if Ian Noble would approve. I'm not quite sure that he was up to handing over his land. Dear Ian, wherever he is. But I know that he liked bringing people together, and I know that he liked bringing our communities together. So I think he would, in that respect, have approved. And Sabhal Mòr has, over the years, proved to be a great venue for this conference. I hope we don't outgrow it. Who would ever have thought we'd even have thought that was a problem? But we could always shove a few more rows of seats along the frontier, I'm sure, if it comes to that. So thank you to everybody at Sabhal Mòr Ostaig. Meg, or whoever is in touch with them, please pass that on. Thank you to our funders. You've seen them names all listed in your programme. They're not up. That's all right, Meg, don't worry. Don't worry, you failed at that. Thank you. Without their help, without their funding, it wouldn't be possible, because we're not an organisation with big funds, and neither are most of you. Thank you to Ailsa and my board colleagues. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes. It's a great board to be involved in. We also, as you heard, are losing a couple of old friends. Thank you to Lincoln and the others who are standing down. And if you're interested, please make your interest known to Ailsa or somebody else on the board, because we really do, we want to get new people on board. That's what it's all about. And finally, can I just read a few words from Alistair McIntosh's recent, rather stimulating report. If you haven't read it, can I absolutely recommend that you do. Cheerio the Stag and the Black Carbon, who would have thought? And in it, this just jumped out at me. Scotland's rolling programme of land reform therefore matters, far beyond just agriculture or forestry or land economics. It matters because the land and nature, wild and free, restores our human sensibility, our capacity to feel. But people must be integral to that. We too are nature. In our human nature, or, as an island poet put it, as real people in a real place. Thank you, Alistair, for the report. Thank you all for coming, and safe home.